Well, hey, folks, welcome to the pre-show of the Intrepid radio program. We sit here for about 3 minutes every night before the show starts and just kind of check on all our settings, make sure we're rolling correctly, get the mic set up. Everything's set. I already did it. So here we are. Hey, Barbie D. Hey, Field Guy. Good to see you over there in the chat room. Nice to have you this evening. Just standing out in the cold garage with my son, talking about swords and armor and stuff like that. So that was fun, except it got cold too quick. We're going down a little bit cooler tonight. And it's been in the 30s and the 40s, almost 50 the other day, which is heat wave here. And so now we're going to be down. I think tomorrow our high is like 19, 18, something like that. But by the weekend, it's supposed to be back up into the upper 30s. Cheers for that. Pushing 40 again. Hey, Barbie D. Yeah, those front seat rows. What's nice about them, they're the elite seats. There's no popcorn under the chairs, no sticky melted candy or spilled pop. You got the elite seat in the house. Yeah, Field Guy, I saw your post that you sent over to me with the temps. You're going up into the 70s and the 80s. That's what it was when I was down in Louisiana about this time 2 years ago. And yeah, it was right away into the 70s and the 80s. We loved it. Didn't like the humidity, but that's okay. You know, I could, if I wouldn't have to lean forward if I'd put on my glasses, but I don't like wearing them all the time on air. There you go. They're reflective. There, you can see my screen reflected in my glasses if I tip my head up far enough. Good old Louisiana temps, says Field Guy. So we've got about 40 seconds, and we go live over on the radio network. And so we'll go dark here in about 30 seconds and hit the start button. So let me get that set up so I'm right there when that happens. And I hope you all are having a good day. What do we got? 240. All right. I'm going to go dark. Sit right there. We'll be back in a few seconds once the show starts.
The Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Well, happy Wednesday night, everyone. Welcome to the program. I'm Scotty Roberts, your host here on my show, the Intrepid radio program, now in its 22nd year. We started with a different name, but I can claim that, right? Even though it was a different name 22 years ago. And I want to welcome you here and thank you for coming. You can hear this show if you're not there and you're watching it in some other stream. You can hear the audio on this show and audio replays the next day over at subspace.radio, just like you see right there, that logo right there in the corner of the screen. And if you're just listening live over on the radio station, you can also come over to my YouTube channel and several other places over on Facebook, also on Twitter, and pretty soon we'll be on Spreaker again. And you can watch the video simulcast of this show. And most importantly, on the YouTube channel, you can join the chat room that is there. Already starting to fill up with fellow Intrepids, and there's good conversation that goes on over there, even while I'm talking about things. So go on over there and have a good time. While you're at my YouTube channel, you can hit the subscribe button, which costs you nothing. You just subscribe to the show and hit the little bell icon, and you will get announcements of this show when it plays. And also, if you so desire, you can, down below the screen here somewhere, there's a little join button. Now, that one costs you a little bit of money. You hit the join button, And you can join this broadcast for $1 a month, $5 a month, or $15 a month. And you can look there. There's supposedly some things you get if you do that. We've only done a few of them, but we want to step that up. We're going to be rebranding this show soon. We're in the works with all of that right now. And so go on over there and join. You never have to pay to hear this show, but there will be other content that you can see. And it also helps support us. So thank you very much in advance. And we've been talking about Pharaoh. We've been kind of going back to some of the roots of this show, which I enjoyed immensely, talking about Pharaoh of the Exodus right now, but talking about history, Egyptian history, British history, other weird histories around the world, things like that. We're going to be doing more and more of that stuff as we go. Hey, Catherine Roop, good to see you over there in the chat room. I barely saw you. I don't have my glasses on. And so who all is here so far? We got Catherine, we got Barbie D, we got Field Guy, we got Mechanics, we got Andrew Specht. We've got, hey, Andrew, by the way, I saw you the other day and I didn't get a chance to say hello to you. I think it was either during Robertson or during this show. And let's see who else we got. Not too many else showing their face in the chat room yet. And keep in mind, while you sit out there, there's a lot of people that watch this show and listen to this show, but they never show up in the chat room. You can come to the YouTube channel, sign into the chat room, and you can join the chatting. Hey, Viking off-roading. Good to see you. Hope you're all, and Cordia is here, Spirit Heart Gods and Goddesses. Matt Finn is here, Master Finn. I like to refer to Master Finn as Master and Commander of this here chat room over on the YouTube channel. And Catherine, by the way, I see you've got a little Facebook icon by your name. If you want to come over to the YouTube channel, the link is in the show description. And you can come on over here and you can join the chat room and meet the other chatters here, the other Intrepids, fellow Intrepids. And by the way, I just want to tell you, because it's my show and I can do whatever the hell I want, I had a little diabetic thing going yesterday. Now, I might need to talk to Sarah Yusuf when she comes in, let her know I want to talk to her about this, because she always mentions that stuff. I've had diabetes for a long time. And adult onset. It hit me 2003, I think was the first year I really noticed I had it. And with that diabetic stuff, I'm not always the tightest manager of my diabetes. Now, for the most part, I take my meds. I got to take shots. I do all that stuff. I've been doing it for a long time, and 15 years plus. And but sometimes I'll run out of something and I'm like, oh, I got to order that, and a week will go by without meds or something, and of course I got to take all the heart meds, and I got to take all the blah 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 meds and the blah 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 meds. At my age, I'm starting to turn into something I never wanted to be, and that was a walking medicine chest. So I have to be careful and I have to watch out. Sometimes, though, I get a little free and loose and hippie freestyle, peace and love about the way I eat something. It's like it's got sugar in it. I'll survive. And I don't pay close attention. Well, yesterday I was just feeling wonky in the head, lightheaded, all of that stuff. Actually, the last couple of days. And I got these little blood meters here. I got to take my blood. And I find out I am, well, what it does, the normal blood sugar level, some of you are diabetic, you know this, between 70 on the low side, 110 to 120 on the high side. That's where you want to maintain that. And so you watch what you eat. You take a little extra of the before meal shot if you know you're going to eat something really starchy or carbs or sugar, things like that. So I took my blood sugar and it said hi when I put the blood strip in, and you just poke your finger and you touch the little thing, and it ain't no big shakes. And so I said, hi. No, does that mean hi like an HIGH high? Or does that mean hi like an welcome to your device, which I'd never seen it do before? So I assumed the former. And it's high. And so Rainey got the little book for my meter. And she said, hi, when you get a high reading, it means you're 600 or over. 600 points for your blood sugar. I'd never been that high before. And so, Leslie Hooker, you want to balance your diet? Diabetes can be as dangerous as any heart issue. That's right. Even my doc told me last week, she said, you're up just a little bit. Your A1C is up a point. You want to get that back down. And she said, it can lead to more heart problems and more other stuff and junk and juju and blah, blah, blah. So I was at 600 yesterday. And remember, you're supposed to be between 70 and 110-ish. And so, OJ Spike it. There it is. And so I immediately just started drinking a little more water. And I felt woozy in the head all day. I was like, oh my God. And I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't think straight, but I wasn't like passing out or anything. And then there was one point where I said, I'm feeling really kind of weak. And so I took a shot earlier in the day than I normally would of my end of the day shot. And it started to come down into the 400s. And then I realized I hadn't eaten all day. Eating, you got to keep that balanced. Just because you don't eat doesn't mean your blood sugar is not going to be affected negatively. So I ate a little something and then took a shot for that. And then I was down in a normal range. I was exactly at 110. And I thought, wow, that's fantastic. Then an hour later, I was down to 67, which is just below the low point of normal, which I never get to. So it was extremely low for me. And I was at that point where it's like, hey, Rainey, would you get me something sugary? I will not navigate the stairs well. And I don't like that kind of feeling. I don't get that stuff. I don't like to be loss of control of my daily activities. But I felt so woozy. I thought if I do the steps, I'm down. Artist down. So it finally went back up, it went down, went up and down, and that was about 110 when I went to bed last night. I'm feeling pretty good now. I woke up at about 3:30 in the morning and I thought, I'm going to test my blood. Now I had gone to bed. It was 110. I hadn't eaten anything before bed. And here it was now. And that was about 7 o'clock last night. All the time, by the way, they were having water leaking in the basement window. And Rainey's trying to mop that stuff all up. And I still had not. So my chronology's off a little bit here. I was still wobbly. And she kept telling me, go sit down, stop lifting things. So she did all that. She had to bail out the window wells that were flooding in. That's part of the house. We haven't lived in this house at this time of year yet. And so, it was the drunk effect. That was pretty much what it felt like. And so not to make a long story even longer, but so I sat down. I fell asleep pretty promptly. And I woke up about 3:30. I took my blood. I was at 400 again. I'm like, why is my blood sugar up? I thought, is my regulator shot or something? And my meaning internal regulator. And by the time I got up, I took the shot for the morning. I went back to bed for a couple hours, got up to get the kids to school. I was down into the mid 300s. And so all today, I've been flirting with the between low 200 and 300. And I felt kind of wobbly today. So I called my doc. I'm going to go in for an appointment just to see. We're trying to get me one of those meters where you put it on. It's got insulin that it pumps into you. And you don't have to. I've got friends who've had those for years. It's just, there's this thought. And maybe this is the point to take away with this. When you start getting a little older and you start having these things happen to you, these health issues and all of that, you start to think, you try to fight it as much as you can because you're like, I do not want to be the diagnosed physical patient. I do not want to lose touch with my virility. I do not. I already get that because I got to take so many meds every day. I'm like, geez. And, I take a handful of meds in the morning and a couple at night, plus all my shots throughout the day. That's a pain in the ass, especially if I travel. I got to make sure I have all that stuff with me. You got to keep the shots refrigerated so I don't put them in my pocket. They'll get warmed up and then the med gets lackadaisical. So all of that to say, yeah, I've had a couple of wobbly, wonky, mentally distant days, and it bugs the hell out of me. I don't like it. So I've got Ruben Fasthorse who wants a link. Ruben, if you're listening, I can send you a link, but not to come into the show because I got a different show going tonight. Friday night, I want to have Ruben back on, and I hope you're listening, brother. Misu, my good friend. Those of you who don't know Ruben because you haven't seen him on the show before, I'm just, pardon me a second. I'm going to put not tonight, but Friday. Let's see. But Friday, unless you'd like, I'm a slow typer, to come into the captain's cabin after 11 p.m. your time. There we go. Sorry for that little interlude, folks. So anyway, I thought I'd just share the little up and down diabetes day. You can turn around with food and natural supplements. Yeah, you can. I think Dave's telling that to the audience, not to me, because I know all that stuff. There's good things you can do. Doug Stack, Grumpy Stack, who's in here, has a pretty good program that he can set you up with. And I've turned it around with just food, too, myself in the past. Because it's like, oh, I'm running high. My A1C is high. So I think I'm going to just try to really concentratedly eat better. And it works. Drops my A1C down and all of that stuff. So some of it is just, you have to get your head out of the mode of I'm denying things to myself. And not that I'm denying myself the stuff I want to eat. I don't like to have to be controlled about things. Why everything has to be discipline. Everything has to be this. But Ruben, I'll send you a link. He's going to come on for the captain's cabin at the top of the hour, and after we go off the radio, those of you just listening on the radio station, you want to see that we stay live over on the YouTube channel and the Facebook channels, and you can continue watching the show after we go off of the there. Now I've taken to talk about stupid, mundane things, but I'm sure we all have some of these. I cannot take your call, Ruben. I'm in the show, so he's trying to call me. Let's see. After 11 p.m. your time. Boom. So let's see. Because we got a topic tonight, believe it or not, even though we spent the first 13 minutes talking about mundane, weird, wonky stuff. And life is too short to deprive yourself. Yes, it is, Leslie. But sometimes you gotta. Like, there's certain things I can't have. I can't eat a lot of salt. I used to be one of those guys who would like get French fries and salt them before I even tasted them. I was that kind of. Now I've really conditioned myself over the last 6 years since the heart surgery to not salt my food so much. Sometimes I don't salt it at all. So hold on. Woo! Sorry about that, folks. There was a live sneeze on live radio without a sneeze button. So take a drink after that. This is not spiked, by the way. Yeah, we hardly use salt anymore. I sometimes like a little bit of it on things. I go, oh, that needs something. So anyway, let's get off the diabetes and the health stuff. We could talk about that for an hour and take calls from everybody and talk about all this stuff. Maybe we'll do that sometime. Just single that out and do that. I'm glad your sound is perfect, Barbie D. Let's see. Is somebody not getting the sound very well? High vibes and cosmic hugs. No, that's not about the sound. Hey, Pearl Jones. Delaney. Pearl Jones. I don't use salt, says Barbie D. Yeah. I like salt, but I'm not supposed to eat a lot of it. I will tell you this. Do you remember with my heart, the surgery I had 6 years ago? Then for 5 years, it seemed like 5, 6, 7 times during that 5 years post-surgery, I would have something going on with my heart. There was one morning I was up at 5 and I was reading email, drinking coffee, and I felt, kind of what I felt in my shoulder when I had the first heart attack that alerted me to that. And it was like, wow, shoulder hurts today. And I wasn't thinking heart attack because I didn't seem to have any other symptoms. And I got up and I thought, oh, I slept wrong on my shoulder. And which is exactly what I said the night I had my first heart attack, which led to the surgery. And I was stretching. I go, wow, that hurts. And I stood up and I kind of stretched my chest and stretched my arms out. And then I sat down. I got nauseous, just a little nauseous. I'm like, oh, that ain't right. And so much so, I walked over to the bathroom because I thought I might lose my cookies. And that went away. And it was good. But a couple of things like that over that half hour. And I thought, this isn't good. And I called Rainey and I went up and woke up Rainey and I said, you better take me into the ER. This is before kids went to school. And she took me in and they said, you're having a heart attack right now. And they said, we got to rush you up to the big hospital in the city in St. Paul, because we live outside the city. So you've all heard bits and pieces of these things before. But so 5 times over the last 6 years, I've had these, what I call these mini heart attacks. Not sure if I'm having a heart attack, but feeling a little something, feeling at my shoulder, get a little nauseous, whatever it is. And I've checked them out. And it wasn't until a year ago, February last year, that I was in there. They had me on the table. They had the coat hanger running up from my crotch into my heart. And they're rooting around in there for stuff with a little camera. And he goes, oh, look at this. He says, I found the reason you're having all these little heart attacks. And this was a new cardiologist. I told you guys about this last year. But he said, that day you had your heart surgery, they also put in a stent. Well, they put in the wrong size. He says, look at it. It's too small. And he's shown it to me. So he replaced that. Now, knock on wood, I haven't had any problems with my heart for a year. Let's hope it stays that way. So there you go. Bada boom. Salt is considered something to ward off evil, says Sarah Yusuf. Yeah, like bland. Salt wars off the evils of bland flavors. So, yeah, Leslie, I even called an attorney about that. And at the doctor's he says, you ought to call somebody about this. And they said, oh, we would have had to discover that within the first year. And I said, well, what if it takes 5 years for it to have an effect? I said, it's the first year of the 5. So, I didn't pursue it. Not a big deal. I'm so done with dealing, rankling with people. So all of that to say, had a woozy couple of days here, not heart related, but I hate that. I hate losing control of my faculties. This is why I don't like getting drunk. I used to like to drink, and I don't mind a little tipsy. I don't mind a little buzz going on. I don't like drunk because I do not like losing control of my faculties. And same thing with being sick. I don't like that kind of stuff. So anyway, boom. So let's move on. Amenhotep II. How's that a segue for segues? It is now 9:24 here in Central America, Central United States. Let me correct that. We're not down in Central America. We're not in Guatemala or anything like that. But we might have listeners down there. So Central United States. And if salt causes it shifted. If salt causes your heart problems, Does that not mean you have an evil heart? Says Dave Potter, Uncle Dave. And Leslie says, I did too, and then I had children. Nothing cures your being drunk, like waking up to children the next morning. Ain't that the truth? That's why I have people that come over and offer me, they say, hey, let's drink. Drink online, drink on the show. Like Sam and I, my oldest son, Sam and I. Sam the leprechaun. And he would come in, and when we were down in Louisiana working together, he'd get on the show with me. You all remember Sam. That was 2 years ago, by the way. Time flies. And he likes to come over. He would love to come over and have drinks every now and then. I can't do it when I got kids at home. I just don't feel right about drinking a little too much when I have children at home. Same thing with weed. I don't like to smoke weed when Now, Rainey will now and then let me do those things. You go ahead and you just do that. And she said, I've got it handled here. So, hey, Patch. Good to see Patch out on the road. Where are you tonight, Patch? So let's clear out of all that material that had nothing to do with what we're talking about tonight and get to what we're talking about tonight. Amenhotep II, Pharaoh of the Exodus, I believe. Now, you all know I had my former studies in my early years, Bible college, seminary. I was in ministry. I was a youth pastor. And I did a lot of studying about the Pharaoh of the Exodus. And let me remind you all that when I first learned of Amenhotep II, I was going to Sunday school. And I was 11 years old. And it was a Sunday school at a big church in Minneapolis. And this church had 1,500 members if they had one. Just packed, big church. And they had a school, an elementary to high school. They also had the seminary was housed there. They also owned a college down in southern Minnesota. They also, I can't take your call, Ruben. Hold on. Ruben, I'm on radio, so I can't talk to you right now. Call back after 11 o'clock. Okay?
Oh, so
all right.
send me the link.
I did. It's in your messenger. Okay.
All right.
I'll talk to you in a bit.
Yep.
Okay. And so I was in this Sunday school class, and they had a lot of the seminary students would do the teaching of Sunday school classes for the boys. And because we divided them up that way. And he gave us all a little report to do. And he gave me a report, as fate would have it, on the Pharaoh of the Exodus. He said, by next Sunday, just come and, write 100 words. And 100 words ain't nothing, by the way. You look at Twitter. Try to fit something you want to say sometimes into 141, or is it 250 words now? Doesn't always fit. So 100 words on the Pharaoh of the Exodus. You can write more if you want, but at least 100 words. So he told me, he gave me, write about the Pharaoh of the Exodus. And if all of you at least had Sunday school somewhere along the way, you're going to know that you learned about the Exodus, Moses, the Exodus, the 10 plagues, the children of Israel in captivity in Egypt, the 10 commandments, and things like that. We all learned those superficial stories, the parting of the Red Sea, all of that stuff. Well, I had some ideas of it, and I was told by the seminary student who was my teacher, go talk to Chucky Ailing. And we've had Chucky Ailing on this show in recent years. And Chuck Ailing went on to be Dr. Charles Ailing. He was an archaeologist, an Egyptologist. He wrote a little book called Egypt and Bible History. But I met with him on the Sunday morning, Chucky Ailing. And I think he was a fellow seminary student, because the seminary student who was my teacher didn't tell me to use the title doctor. Call him Dr. Ailing. No, he said Chucky Ailing. Okay. And he said, well, my theory on Pharaoh of the Exodus was a man named Amenhotep II. and he gave me the whole rundown on Amenhotep. And I ran with that for years. I was interested in that for years. I wrote papers in college about him. I wrote papers in seminary. I studied him. And finally, I wrote that book, as you all know, of The Exodus Reality, with my partner, John Ward. Not my partner in life, John Ward, my friend partner. Yes, not that there's anything wrong with that. If you want to be gay, you can be gay. I don't have a partner because I'm not gay. He wasn't my partner that way. But sometimes you say that. And nowadays you just gotta clarify. So my partner in crime, and we wrote a book. We had two different theories on the Exodus. John's an archaeologist in Egypt, and they've got a site there. You all know who he is. One of these days I'll get him to come on this show. But the time difference and all of that. So we wrote a book about it, and it sits over on my shelf over there. You can get it. There's a million places to get it. And a beautiful book. We had 16 pages of color. That was my first trip to Egypt, was going over there and traveling to all the places with John. And John lived over there. So we got into everything and got to see everything and had a lot of antics. So we treated the book like buddies on the road, doing our thing, our shtick, studying Moses, studying the Exodus, studying the captivity in Egypt and things like that. And so we had a great time with it. Now, Barbie D says Ramses, I think. Is that, yeah, that's what a lot of us were told, that it was Ramses. That was one of the things we talked about in the last show, was the late and early dates of the Exodus. And the late date would place it in 1267 BCE, during the reign of Ramses II, Ramses the Great. But he was not the Pharaoh of the Exodus. Nothing fits historically to place him as the Pharaoh of the Exodus. And some scholars, they go, well, it's mentioned in the Bible that the Hebrews built the treasure cities of Pithom and Ramses. And Pithom and Ramses were built by Ramses II, Ramses the Great. So how can you have the Israelites in captivity in Egypt building his cities? Wouldn't that make him the Pharaoh? No. It was found out, without getting into the minutiae, because this is all recap, that they actually built the city that lies beneath Pi-Ramses, Avaris, several hundred years earlier. 200 years earlier was the Exodus. And so, which I believe took place in 1446 BC, and that's what we're doing with Amenhotep II. We're looking at all the things that justified the dating system of using him, marking him as the Pharaoh of the Exodus without any question whatsoever about it. I don't think there's any way to question the date, especially after we finish this little series we're doing. We won't finish it tonight because I spent too much time talking about diabetes. But we'll finish it in a night or two on this show, Showtime. And so Amenhotep II was the Pharaoh that I believe was the Pharaoh of the Exodus. And that's what this show is about. It's establishing those facts. So Barbie D, I don't know that you thought it might be Ramses. We've always been taught it was Ramses. I mean, hell, look at the big CinemaScope Technicolor movie, The Ten Commandments, which came out in 1957. Charlton Heston playing Moses. And Yul Brynner playing Ramses II. So it shall be written, so it shall be done. Loved him. What a great screen presence he was. Loved all his movies. Well, anyway. Ramses II is too late in history. And we're going through now in this series all the reasons why he is. And many things. Sacking of towns under the conquest that, frankly, were dead towns already by the time Ramses came to the throne. All kinds of dates. So we're going to look at this now. So what does Steve say about it? Took off running. I reached out and slapped him between the eyes. Oh, something totally different. Sorry. All right. So let's get into it now. Let's get into where we kind of left off. I'm going to have to put on my cheating bifocals, by the way. I could make the type big type, but then I feel even older. I'll just read it in big type, Helen. So where we left off on Monday night was we were talking about the survival of Amenhotep II during the 10th plague. Now, if you remember your story of the Exodus, you remember Moses at age 80, he's sent by God to go back to Egypt. He says, all the people that sought your life, that you ran from, you've been out here 40 years. He said, they're all dead now. You can go back. It's safe for you to go back. I want you to lead my people out of Egypt. And basically, he told them, and we learn along the way, that God raised Moses up to be a man who was raised in the courts of Pharaoh, raised as a royal, raised as a Egyptian prince. And I don't think that there was any big deal with him being Hebrew, which they made in the movie. That had to be the big conflict. Ramses finds out that Moses is of Hebrew birth. Well, I don't think it mattered. They had all kinds of people like that they brought in. If you were adopted by the Pharaoh, you were adopted by the Pharaoh. And so here you got Moses. He was there for 40 years, killed the Egyptian taskmaster, and fled. It says he fled to Midian, which is out somewhere in the Sinai. And yet there are some Jewish literature, the Mikvah, the Mishvah, Mishnah, I mix up which one you're going to find it in. The rabbinical writings that say he went first down to Ethiopia, and he took a bride down there, and then went back to Midian after that. So there's all kinds of stuff. That's a different story. But I want to look at the survival. During the 10 plagues, it was Pharaoh who said, I don't know this God of yours. I will not let your people go. And Moses said originally, God's telling him to go deliver the people. Moses is asking Pharaoh, I want to take him out into the desert to worship our God for a few days. And Pharaoh's like, ain't buying that. You're not going anywhere. I do not know this God, he said, nor will I let your people go. So I don't know if there were euphemisms in there in the linguistics that meant, hey, let us go out to the desert for a few weeks and we're going to worship our God. I don't think I saw anywhere it says, and we'll be back after that. So I think Pharaoh knew what was up. He saw the game afoot. The Midrash. There you go. Thank you, Sarah. My mind is on a slow ebb. I said the Mikvah, the Midrash, the Midrash. So there are stories, by the way, of Moses in Jewish literature, the Midrash, where he was a general that was fighting for the Pharaoh. And he was going to take over a throne down there. That's, I think, where he went back and got the princess. So interesting story when you see all that stuff. And the Red Sea parted and they all had Kool-Aid, said field guys. Something like that. And I've even got, there's some great theories about the Red Sea. We've talked about that, but since you mentioned it, there is, remember in the scripture, it says, and Moses stretched the rod of God over the waters, and a strong east wind blew all night and parted the waters. And they were like a wall on the right and a wall on the left. Now, people have interpreted that as all the 30-foot waves and walls. You know, a wall can be 2 feet high, too. So we don't know what the height was, just to say, because I believe there was a mistranslation. The Red Sea in the Old Testament is really actually the Sea of Reeds, or the Yam Suf, which is up north of the Red Sea. We drove through that area, and it's a shallow sea. It's an inland sea. Shallow by meaning there are parts you could walk through waist or armpit deep to the other side, but there are deeper parts too. Well, it says a strong east wind blew all night. There's a geographical event that can take place, and it doesn't happen often, but it's been recorded and documented, where a strong east wind coming off the Negev, which is where, you start to swoop under the Mediterranean from Egypt and start heading north toward Israel. Off the Negev, an east wind blows in, and it has the effect of parting the waters. It dries off the water, blows the water back, But when the wind stops blowing, it's like, bam, a tsunami, even for a shallow lake, because it stacks up. And if you're caught in the middle of that, you could be in an awful lot of trouble and might not make it out. And so that's one of the geographical events that took place that I think really explains the Red Sea crossing in natural terms as we look into it. Column of fire, totally different. That I think was all God. I still think the Red Sea was a God thing too. They're miraculous events. But I do think that otherwise, you would have had to been there on the right day for the sea to part. I'm not sure they were that adept at forecasting the wind at that time. But I think the column of fire was obviously a miracle, a miraculous event. It either happened or it didn't happen. If it didn't happen, it was something exaggerated in the storytelling. If it did happen, it was something that you don't get pillars of fire that rise up out of nowhere. People traveled Bedouin style back then. They knew how to travel. That's right, Steve, or Elderberry. And the Creator causes the wind to blow. Sure he does. Does he cause it to blow off the Rocky Mountains into Denver? Sure. He set things in motion. Does that mean that the God of the world or the universe doesn't have the ability to create a miracle? I think he does. He doesn't do it often, but when he does it. And he had a purpose for doing this. So I tend to think that God set it, but why didn't God just go, oh, whoosh, there the waters parted? No, it said a strong east wind blew all night and did it, according to the scripture, which is one of the natural events that takes place in the Negev down to the Sinai. No aliens, I don't think so. So getting back into the story here, we all know the 10 plagues. It was the 10th plague that changed Pharaoh's mind. He's just like, get your butts out of Egypt. I have a theory about that too. I think Moses may not have been dealing with the Pharaoh. I think he may have been dealing with Pharaoh's man who is Pharaoh in the place of Pharaoh, the Grand Vizier. It's a possibility. Just because of some really obscure phraseology in some of those verses in the Bible text where it says, Pharaoh, it says he walked in and he said, where are my slaves? Like he didn't know what had just happened. And he was told they've gone and done this. So, well, Pharaoh AMENHOTEP II had 5 to 7 very successful military campaigns prior to the date of the Exodus. And it is thought that he may have been out on campaign and just returned from campaign. And this is why, in a moment's notice, he had that army back on their chariots, and they were out pursuing the Israelites who had left a day or two before. So, or it's just simply he changed his mind and he went to get them. And we're going to track these people down or kill them or whatever. Yeah, the real Ramses was on vacation. The real Ramses wasn't born for 200 years yet. Keeping up, field guy. So during the 10th plague, what was the 10th plague? Remember, you had to put, God said he was going to send the angel of death and kill the firstborn of everyone. The 10th plague on Egypt specified that the firstborn of all classes of people, from Pharaoh on the throne to the lowest slave girl behind the millstone, along with the firstborn among the livestock, would all die at the hands of the death angel. You can find this in Exodus chapter 11. And being that the throne was included in this edict, one might expect that Pharaoh himself, if he actually was the firstborn son of his father, which was the normal protocol for succession under Egypt's dynastic rule, would have died during this last and most terrible plague of them all, of the 10. However, since the Exodus Pharaoh obviously lived through the final plague, he couldn't have been the king's eldest son, a title the Egyptians liberally used of Pharaoh's eldest son. Title is the king's eldest son. and who stood in line behind his father as the heir apparent to the Egyptian throne. Therefore, in order for Amenhotep II to qualify as a legitimate candidate for the Exodus Pharaoh by the biblical narrative, he could not have been the king's eldest son. Now, this is some of the material I say that I've said that you have to dig into to get a little better understanding of who this guy was. And why is it important to know, for us to know, that Pharaoh was not, of the Exodus, was not the firstborn of his father? If you're doing chronology and trying to pin a name and a date to the name of the Pharaoh, it's very important that you figure out why, because otherwise he would have died in the Exodus. So this would be a key feature of whoever was sitting on the throne during the Exodus and did not die during the 10th plague, that he was indeed not a firstborn son of the Pharaoh. So, and this could trash my whole theory that maybe Pharaoh was gone during the time, because this really is an earmark. It doesn't say adolescence, though. It just says firstborn. The firstborn, Sarah, of the richest, the firstborn of the poorest, and everybody in between, firstborn of the cattle and the sheep and the livestock. All these firstborn were going to die. And that the only way you could avoid it was miraculous. You had to pick a piece of hyssop, a bush, and you had to dip it in lamb's blood and put it on the lintel of your door and on the side posts to signify that you are covered. And then the angel of death wouldn't visit your house. So you had all this stuff going on to try to decipher and bring down to why was Amenhotep II a good candidate for Pharaoh? Well, one, he was not the firstborn son of his father. And you have to look at things like the ascension of Thutmose III, his dad. There's three views that were prominent. The high chronology dates it to 1504. The middle chronology dates it to 1490. The low chronology dates it to 1479. And the high chronology is preferred here because it's exclusive agreement with the Ebers Papyrus, which we mentioned last night, when assuming a Memphite point of observation for the rising of the star Sothis. Shia also asserts that the high chronology view is correct, that Amenhotep II was Pharaoh. The high chronology date used by the present writer, that this would have been Shea, dates back 2 years from the standard number due to the need to harmonize it with the Second Palestinian Campaign of Amenhotep II, which will be discussed later in this little series. But the alteration is justified both by the uncertain regnal length of Thutmose II, who was the father of Thutmose I, the husband, brother to Hatshepsut. He died early. She took over as Pharaoh, but was co-regent with Thutmose III. And his reign only lasted about 4 years or more, not more than 12 years, if you're looking at the different chronologies. And there was a variable of plus or minus 6 years after the calculating the date for the rising of Sothis. And so the Pharaoh himself, if he actually was the firstborn son of his father, would have died in the Exodus. Now, Amenhotep II indeed would have survived the 10th plague because he was not the firstborn son of Thutmose III. In the words of Redford, we covered this was the last paragraph we read last night, was that the idea of Amenhotep II was the eldest son of Thutmose III doesn't seem possible in light of our present knowledge. And toward the middle of Thutmose III's reign, in year 24, the heir to the throne was not Amenhotep II, but Amenemnet, who was called the king's eldest son. And there's a little doubt that he was the older half-brother of Amenhotep II, who died before he could assume the throne. And in an inscription from Karnak, the festival hall there, the temple there that dates to year 24. Amenemhet was being appointed to an administrative position in the temple of Amun, and appointing the king's eldest son, Amenemhet, as overseer of cattle. And since Amenemhet probably was no longer a child when the inscription was composed, he could have been born fairly early in the co-regency of Thutmose III and Hatshepsut. So therefore, and remember, Hatshepsut was the co-regent with him until he was almost 30 years old. So Amenhotep II would not have died during the 10th plague, as the record bears out that he was not the firstborn son of Thutmose III. Now, this is where you get into literal interpretations of what you have there. When you start digging a little bit, and you start looking for your historical fact, if you're going to do research on these guys, how many people would think, I'm doing research on Amenhotep II, or the son of the Pharaoh of the Exodus. What are the points I need to think of? One of them is this point right here. Why didn't he die during the 10th plague? He obviously wasn't the firstborn son. So you can X that off your list. Whoever the Pharaoh of the Exodus was not a firstborn son. If indeed the story, and we're assuming that the story of the 10 plagues was accurate and true. And so this is what you have. And the 10th plague and the firstborn son of Amenhotep II. Now his son. Number one, God predicts the death of Pharaoh's eldest son. God told Moses that he would harden Pharaoh's heart and that Pharaoh would refuse to free the Israelites from bondage. Now, I always wondered about that kind of stuff in biblical text. Why is God saying, I want you to go to Pharaoh and ask my people to go? But Pharaoh's going to say no. He's going to say no a bunch of times. And I'm going to harden his heart. I always wondered about that. But you notice also with each one of these, this procession of the 10 plagues that took place, that at first it said, and Pharaoh hardened his heart. And Pharaoh hardened his heart, and Pharaoh hardened his heart against God. Then it starts saying, after the 5th or 6th plague, it starts saying, and God hardened Pharaoh's heart. God hardened Pharaoh's heart. I think there's a principle there that the more you reject, God may just reject you. Is there a point of no salvation? So God predicts the death of Pharaoh. He instructs Moses to tell the Pharaoh, thus saith the Lord, Israel is my son, my firstborn. And I said to you, let my people go, let my son go, as it reads, that he may serve me. But you've refused to let him go. Behold, I will kill your own son, your firstborn. That's in Exodus 4:22 through 23. And after the 9th plague had passed, God repeated this prediction, stating that all the firstborn in the land of Egypt will die, from the firstborn of the Pharaoh who sits on his throne. Therefore, the eldest son of the Pharaoh of the Exodus must have died in the plague, right? So who are the candidates for the eldest son of Pharaoh, Amenhotep II? It's an interesting study all by itself. Thutmose IV as a candidate for the eldest son of Amenhotep II. So for the Exodus Pharaoh, the worst part of God's prediction of judgment was that his own firstborn son would die. We already know he's not going to die because he wasn't a firstborn. But if Amenhotep II was the Exodus Pharaoh, his firstborn son had to die without the chance to rule, which the historical record should confirm, right? And so the son who succeeded Amenhotep II was Thutmose IV. He ruled from 1418 to 1408. His dream stele was located between the paws of the great Sphinx, and it reveals that he was not the original heir to the throne. Moreover, the inscriptional and the papyrus evidence confirms that Thutmose IV was not the eldest son of Amenhotep II. That's why he lived longer. Prince Amenhotep as a candidate for the eldest son of Amenhotep II. So the papyrus in the British Museum, papyrus 10056 if you're interested, speaks of Prince Amenhotep II. The only title used of him, apart from King's Son, is SM Priest, to which Amenhotep is the scribe referring. Although the year is completely lost from the regnal date on this particular MS, the surviving month 4 and the day 1 mark precisely the date of Amenhotep II's accession to the throne, implying that Prince Amenhotep II undoubtedly was his son. So this prince almost certainly resided in or near Memphis, due to his office being connected to the high priesthood of Ptah. Now, upon Amenhotep I's death, years earlier, Thebes was the most prominent city of the native Egyptians, who recently had regained control of their land and embarked on what would become over 150 years of unbroken prosperity. Remember how I said during this period, go back a few hundred years to Joseph. Remember Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers, but raised to position after several years in prison by the Pharaoh because he could interpret dreams. And it said that this Pharaoh, there's a lot of information there that we don't have to go into tonight, but this Pharaoh raised him and as the Grand Vizier, to the position of Grand Vizier, and how Joseph built his palace in Goshen, which was Avaris, not far from Memphis, the northern capital of Egypt. What happened in Memphis? This was the divided kingdom. This is when the Hyksos came in and ruled for 108 years, taking over the north of Egypt. And when Joseph came to the throne, remember, he said to his brothers, when he's promising them land, when you go into Pharaoh to meet with him over this, tell him that you are shepherds and you've been shepherds since the days of your youth, because the Egyptians hate shepherds. Why would he tell them to do that? Because they weren't Egyptians. The Egyptians were in the south, in Thebes, which is now Luxor. So anyway, we're out of time for this tonight for the radio audience. I hate to tell you that, but that's the way it is. And we've got to move away from this now tonight. We're going to go into the captain's cabin. So all of you over in Radio Land, live long and prosper. And we'll see you over in the YouTube channel.
Join us every weeknight at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. The Intrepid radio program, a Scotty Roberts Productions broadcast.
And welcome to the captain's cabin, mateys. And it's time for the after show. And, I always come on these days and say, I don't know how long I'll go. I've been a little mushy in the head the last few days, so I may or may not do much of a long show. And for the after show, it was just supposed to be a little bit of carrying on for a little bit after the show. And it ends up going at least an hour most nights. So let me see. I think Ruben is... nope, that's an old one. I'm going to just paste that in there again for him. If he wants to come in tonight and talk with me on the captain's cabin. And so this is very informal now, of course, compared to the earlier part of the show. As a matter of fact, I could even drop the headers. Boom, there you go. Because we are no longer doing the Intrepid Raider. We're now the captain's cabin. So we're just sitting here enjoying life. So what's on your mind? If you want to call in, you can call in. We'll talk a little bit. And you don't have to. It'd be nice to have you in. So our mechanics. That's right. And after wearing my glasses for an hour, reading my notes, I got to put them back on. So I say the same thing and then proceed to sew 2 hours. There you go. Yeah, that's it, field guy. I could sit and talk. I could do a show all day long if I wanted to. Remember Art Bell? He used to come on at midnight to 5 a.m. That's 5 hours of radio a day. Loved his show, by the way. And I could do that if that's all I was doing. Now, this rebranding, by the way, that we're talking about, might be something that leads us to a place where we can do this show 2 to 3 hours a day. So thank you, Anita. I don't know that I would classify it as under the weather. I'm not like sick with the cold or the flu. It's just feeling wonky from all kinds of insulin stuff to sleep and eating and junk. So I'm not predicting my death anytime soon. Just not. I'm not feeling tip top today or yesterday. So hopefully it'll come. Thank you again, Anita Palmer. Who was the favored Pharaoh? Barbie D asks. Barbie D, what do you mean by that? There were tons of pharaohs. You mean favored by whom? Favored in biblical text? Somebody who was called the favored pharaoh? I'm not sure I understand the context of your question. Fill me in just a little bit on what you're thinking. And if you're talking about the Pharaoh that raised Joseph to the throne, well, he was one of the Hyksos. And the Hyksos were an invading people that they didn't really invade. They had been for 800 years coming into the Nile Delta region and asking for permission to settle there, to raise crops there and livestock, because there was either drought or something else going on in Canaan, and which sometimes we call Palestine in more modern political terms. But the land of Canaan, that whole region up into Turkey, Mesopotamia, down into the Israelite region, all of these other places, it was called Canaan, and they migrated into Egypt. They did this for about 800 years. We got Sarah Youssef on. How you doing, Sarah?
Hey, Scotty.
And so they, for about 800 years, they migrated into the Nile Delta, northern Egypt. And they got involved in the civics, I'm sure, of the towns and the villages there. And eventually this people group just took over the northern capital. And they held it for about 108 years. And so when Joseph was raised up, let me finish this point, Sarah. When Joseph was raised up, it was that story of his brothers were jealous of him. They were all sons of Israel. They sold him into slavery, and he ends up in prison. He becomes a household attendant probably because he was good looking, probably had good strength. Probably saw him wasting away in prison, and he says, "I want this guy." And then he says the wife of Potiphar accuses him of raping her. Says he runs off, leaves his coat in her hand. He's thrown into prison again. And or I might have mixed up those facts. He was a slave, and then he was thrown into prison for that. And the guy who owned him, Potiphar, he probably knew he wasn't guilty. Probably knew his wife pretty well. That's the tone you get in all of that. But he couldn't go against his own wife over the word of a slave. Throws him in prison. Well, there it comes to his attention that somebody had been arrested, that David could predict dreams or interpret dreams. Miraculously, like magically interpret dreams. And of course, this word got all the way to Pharaoh. The Hyksos brought horses to Egypt with them, says Catherine. I didn't even know that. And so Joseph is brought before the Pharaoh who had terrifying dreams. Joseph interprets the dreams, offers advice to the king. The king raises him up in power, makes him the grand vizier of Egypt, and puts him in charge of things. And so now several years pass when Joseph's brothers and his family, they migrate from Canaan and go to the Nile Delta in Egypt, and they ask for permission to have some land there to graze. And that's where Joseph said to him, now, he says, before, and by the way, if you know the story, they thought Joseph's long dead, 20 years. They sold him into slavery. And so he tells his brothers after the big reveal, he says, when you go into Pharaoh, tell him that you're shepherds and you've been shepherds since the days of your youth, because the Egyptians hate shepherds. And I always wondered, why would he tell them, his brothers, the Egyptians hate you guys, but go in and tell them that that's exactly what you are? Well, one of the ways to deduce this is that the shepherding peoples, the Hyksos, they were reviled by the Egyptians. And so this could only have been done with Pharaoh during the time of the Hyksos period. And so Joseph is raised to power. His brothers get the throne. And then remember, it says after he died, a new Pharaoh rose to the throne, or a new king rose to the throne, who had no regard for Joseph. This is a generation later, after the death of Joseph. And he had no regard, and he said, let's oust them and let's put them also into slavery. And that could have been none other than Ahmose the First, who is the father of Tutmosis the First, who was the father of Tutmosis the Second and Hatshepsut, who was the father, then, of course, of Tutmosis the Third and Amenhotep II, the guy we've been talking about. So Ahmose the First drove the Hyksos out of northern Egypt. And then what did they do? They slapped the remnant of the Hyksos into slavery. Slavery, or at least indentured servitude of some sort. And this is where that all took place. And that's also the period during the time of the Hyksos when the Hebrews would have built the city of Avaris. And it's very interesting. We've talked about this before, how they have discovered a palace, the ruins of a palace in Avaris, that match the floor plan, the layout, the number of pillars even, to the temple that Joseph would have built as Grand Vizier in the land of Goshen at Avaris. They also found in the compound of this palace several tombs, and there were, I believe, 13 of them for the 12, and they assume it's for the 12 brothers and Joseph. And that inside Joseph's tomb, what they assume is his tomb, is not labeled. There was a statue. That statue was smashed to bits in antiquity. They put it back together, and there were remnants of the paint. The Egyptians, when they referred to the Canaanites and those coming from that region into the land as Asiatics. And the color they used for the skin in wall paintings, reliefs, statues, when they painted them, were yellow skin for the Asiatics, not because they were Asians, but because they were Middle Easterners, and it was a different color than the reddish brown of the Egyptians, the dark brown for the Nubians, and so on and so on. And so they found this statue, and it was wearing a cloak. And this cloak had multicolored stripes on it, which would fit into the old story of now, why would he still be wearing that later in life? Probably not, but it might have been commemorative. He was holding the flail, but he was not a pharaoh. He had the wig of the time period, the mushroom kind of wig that came out, and it was red hair and the yellow skin. So there's an assumption that this is Joseph, and it goes to the date, and the dating system fits and all that. That's why I brought that up tonight, is that he was raised to power, but it's his descendants. There were about 70 of them that moved from Canaan with the family and settled there. Their descendants became the Israelites, who were eventually slapped into slavery and kept reproducing. So anyway, I've told that all before in different contexts, but that's why I brought that up tonight about Joseph. So very interesting stuff. And Sarah, how you doing?
I'm all right. Joseph could actually be, it's his own show based on the content wise. But I did
there's
have
so much content there
yeah.
that we could do our own show on Joseph. And I did some shows that covered him a little bit, but we could certainly do more.
Yeah.
And I'd like to do that too.
So I did have a question because at least to, what it seems like in how people interpret the Bible, because some people see it as, allegorical, in what we're supposed to get out of it. And in this way, you're looking at it as being historical. Is it because having the ability to connect, what's in the Bible to actual places and peoples, and that it tends to lend validity that, for the
that's what I love about this history, is it validates certain things. Now, one thing I found, it doesn't necessarily validate your faith. Faith is a chosen thing. It's a thing but what it does is it validates the information that has the faith story wrapped around it in the Bible. And if you have a faith story and it's supposed to be something true and you're supposed to believe it according to that faith, and they wrap it in history or around history that's false or just a story, contextually they could get away with that 3,000 years ago. Might not be able to get away with that for very long, as people will look into things. And what's very interesting is biblical archaeology, which I think is very important for the sole fact that it takes a document that is the cornerstone of one of the 3 huge Abrahamic religions out there, and it qualifies and verifies almost every point of history they go out. I've come to the opinion that if they can't qualify a bit of history in the Bible, they just haven't found it yet. Because just about everything they've set out to do, they found the history is accurate. And even people go, oh, no, the Ramses, and it doesn't work. And then you find out all this information about Ramses, find out about Joseph. And I always hail back to the cornerstone of Pontius Pilate, which was discovered in the early 1960s at Caesarea Philippi, which was the capital city of Rome in Judea back in that day. They think there's not much information about Pontius Pilate out there until they find this cornerstone with this inscription on it. Boom. It validates the history. And maybe not all the faith story wrapped around, but it validates the history. And if the history is not incorrect, then maybe the story isn't. Yes, Ruben, welcome.
Yes, just want to kind of springboard off of that. I love everything that everybody's been saying about that. But ritual is man's construct, just like time is
Yes.
construct of mankind. Ritual is necessary for us to
It is.
reinvest what we're doing, whether it's
Yeah.
Native American, Hebrew, Russian. I don't care who you are, where you come from, but we need something that makes us remind why we're doing what we're doing.
I believe that.
And Egyptian, the pyramids, everything has to happen for not for the gods and the goddesses, because I'm a polytheistic. I'm a many godded man, goddess person. In that way where we need to help ourselves. And that's what it comes down to recognize and realize that we need these pyramids. We need these Sundance trees. We need these ceremonies so that we can feel like we're connected again back to nature, back to the stars, to the earth, whatever it is. And I love that you bring this up. This is really, really good. This is really important.
Oh, thank you. I agree with you. I think Sarah, I'd like to get your take on that too, because I think what Ruben mentions is a very important thing, that we have ritual. And I think where we have societies where faith is dying out, our society is becoming more and more secular. I think that there's a forgotten ritual, forgotten ceremony, forgotten things that we forget that keep us connected. What are your thoughts on that, Sarah?
Well, I mean, in terms of, ritual, it's also, we're constantly doing ritual. Some of it may not be, we consider religious now, like you say, it's being secular, but it's interesting, because the Exodus story itself gets, it's also, a conflict of culture, because it's the Abrahamic God versus,
the gods of Egypt.
Egypt, where they see their Pharaoh as supreme being leader, and it's in its own way, it's showing the Abrahamic dominance over that. Hey, my God is better than your God, sort of thing.
Right.
And you're going to see that in the Bible, of course.
It's Sarah. I don't mean to interrupt, but my name is Reuben. And Reuben is one of the 12 tribes of Israel.
One of the 12 brothers that sold Joseph into slavery.
And they threw Joseph with the multicolored coat into a well. And Reuben was the one that came and got him out. He's the eldest.
Yeah.
So I know my history. I was that close to becoming a Catholic Jesuit priest. A Jesuit priest in the Catholic Church is like a soldier priest. They send these guys in to take over and do stuff. And they came to my people, and we overtook them because we taught them a saying that said, when you walk into another person's country, take your socks and shoes off, for the land you walk on is sacred, and God and the goddess was there before you. Take your socks and shoes off. Be barefoot.
I remember Moses with the burning bush. And by the way, Tara, thank you for that comment. 700 BC, Hezekiah's tunnel was a fairy tale until the 19th century when they found it in Jerusalem. So, but yeah, what the hell was I going to say? This is the way my mind has been the last couple of days.
Take your socks and shoes off.
Take your socks and shoes off. Yeah, when Moses came to the burning bush, what did God say? He says, take the shoes from off your feet, for the place whereon you stand is holy ground. He said, and there was that respect that was given.
And that's a very Lakota thing. Very Japanese as well. So it's not.
Yes. Yeah. That's cross-cultural. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and not only for respect, there is that I forgot the Latin name. I used to know it in Latin because I learned it in philosophy class. But there's the general rule that that whatever religion the leaders are, that's the religion of the state.
mhm.
It's not depending on how strict or the kingdoms or the regions are. It's because even you're saying you're tying in Reuben's tying in his thing to tie it back to to Moses. When he's off into the desert and he goes off and he gets married, those tribes of he encounters people who are part of the tribe of I think it's not Ishmael or Isaac or Ishmael, one of those. That's sort of the origination of the tribes that eventually turn into Islam. So,
Yeah.
so
let
Um,
me let me just
Elderberry, let me address something. Elderberry says, really, I believe Pharaoh didn't even subscribe to the thought of Joseph's God. Joseph was ingenious, so he was respected for his abilities. Yeah, I don't think, Elderberry, I wasn't mentioning that I think that Pharaoh respected Yahweh or Jehovah, the God of Joseph. It said that he raised him to power. And I think the reason he did that was because they were, remember what Joseph said to his brothers? He said, tell them you're shepherds because the Egyptians hate shepherds. Well, that's a key to understanding that the person who raised him to power wasn't an Egyptian. So he was a Hyksos king, one of the Asiatics. So in a sense, the only affinity I think that they bore, Joseph and the Pharaoh who raised him to power, and the Pharaoh that allowed his brothers to come in and settle there, because Joseph kicked ass in his position. That Pharaoh doesn't say he respected Joseph's God, but they were basically cousins. They were from the same original. Maybe he grew up in Egypt in northern Egypt, this Pharaoh, obviously. But he and Joseph were both from the same roots, and I think that bore a lot of meaning back then.
yeah.
Sarah
I,
says I wrote that in the drive-through at McDonald's. Outstanding.
I want to say this. Today I was walking in, which is a Lenape Native American tribe park called. I'm 10 minutes away from New Jersey. I'm 10 minutes away from Pennsylvania. So I walk in this park and I came across this woman that had Yamani Shunka ke had 3 dogs. And they had names that reference to what we're talking about. One was Amaru, the Egyptian god. And Scotty would know that. Amaru. And then Lucifer and Lilith. Now, I want to take your take on this, Sarah and Scotty,
Okay.
that what I know is Amaru, she said, was an Egyptian god. I don't know what kind. Second thing, Lucifer, of course, we all know was an archangel of God that was against God, so he was denounced. Lilith came from Cain,
Jewish
husband.
midrash. It was Jewish midrash.
Cain became from the land of Nod, N-O-D, but he turned it into Canaan. That's what I know. And Lilith, I think is a beautiful name, but Lilith, because I like dark things anyway, but Lilith was the husband of the consort of Cain, who killed Abel. So
I heard some different versions of that. Cain, according to the scripture, there were 4 people. I've talked about this before, so you've heard me say these things before, everybody. But there were 4 people: Adam, Eve, and their 2 sons, Cain and Abel. Now, the scripture, the Bible, doesn't specify that Eve had any other kids until after the death of Abel, And it says, God has given me a third child, and I will name him Seth. It's kind of bittersweet.
Wow.
And so when Cain kills Abel, and of course we try to place that in, always when we're doing biblical teaching, try to place that into modern 20th to 21st century understanding. Well, if these are the first three people, and you kill your brother with a rock, you might know it's a bad thing, but you didn't have a system of law in place. You didn't have a government even. And so he kills his brother, whacks him, as I like to say, chicken scratch through Abel. And now there's three people. And then Cain goes, and God comes and talks to Cain. And he says to him, before he murders Abel, he says, Abel, he says, I know what you're thinking. He says, don't do this. The lion lies at the door, like the sin, and the lion lies at the gate. Don't open the gate. And don't do this thing. Well, what does he do? He still whacks his brother. And then God comes looking for him. Hey, Cain. What's the first thing God says? Hey, Cain, where's your brother? You know, like it's almost like that mob boss sound who already knows everything. Oh, yeah, you know, yeah.
It's the parent who already knows the answer to the question.
The parent who knows the
They'll ask
answer.
it, yeah.
So where's your brother? I'd like to know. And Cain says the famous answer, am I my brother's keeper?
Ah.
And
That's where that
God
comes
says, the blood of your brothers cries out to the ground, from the ground. And what does he do? He puts a mark on Cain so nobody else will find him and kill him for doing this. Well, as far as I could tell, there were two other people, his mom and dad. So he puts a mark on Cain. Now, I've heard the theories that, well, maybe we're talking generations have gone by here. The Bible doesn't tell us. It just says Cain and Abel, and they had this spat over who gets, they didn't even have a spat. Cain was just jealous of his brother before God. They were supposedly knew who God was. So why would he go, I'm going to kill that bastard brother of mine? Not literally, obviously. I'm going to kill him because God favors his offering and not mine. How immature is that sort of thinking? Was Cain born a sociopath? The Bible doesn't say anything like that. Was he retarded? Could he not think? No, the Bible goes on to explain that he knew what he was doing. But the guy that he had a problem with in worship was the guy that supposedly comes and talks to him. God of the universe, who made everything that was. So God comes and talks to Cain afterwards, puts the mark on him. And so Cain runs from the Eden area, the region of Eden, which I believe was between all the rivers. It still bear the same names of the description that you find in Genesis, in between the Tigris and the Euphrates, up toward Turkey. And he flees out east to the land of Nod, which ends up being Iraq.
Thank you.
Nod. On the map.
Nod.
And so he runs to Nod. And it says he marries a woman and builds a city. Now, linguistically, the word for city there could be anything from your compound of your small buildings that you built with a wall around it. And it's a city, or it could mean a vast metropolis. So whichever it is, it says Cain takes a wife, and he goes east to the land of Nod, takes a wife as the second act, and marries her, and he builds this city. And he names the city after his firstborn son, Enoch, which linguistically down through the ages, and this is not the Enoch of the Old Testament that we think of, but Enoch literally means, in linguistic translation, the N becomes a kind of an R sound. The CK becomes a Q sound. And so what you have there linguistically, Enoch, the city of Enoch, is the city of Uruk. Uruk is the ancient pronunciation spelling for Iraq. Now, the city of Uruk is still there. today. You can visit the city of Uruk. Uruk and Enoch, they all meant one thing when it came to the context of city building. It meant first beautiful city.
That's what I know.
And-
That's what I know, Scotty.
That's
And
also
so the big-
Babylonian too, isn't it? Uruk?
Yes.
City of Uruk? Yeah.
Yes.
So,
And so the big
Mesopotamia.
question is, who did Cain marry? And of course, we hear those who, I think there are people who stretch the Bible to fit what they wanted to say in one way, and there's those that do it in another way. I think some of the Bible stretching was, well, obviously, Adam and Eve had more kids, and there were maybe hundreds of people by this time. That's where his wife came from. But it tells us every other detail, but it doesn't tell us that in Scripture. Why is that omitted? Is it supposed to be assumed that he married a sister or a cousin? Was that to be assumed at the time?
So what's your Scotty, what's your take on Lilith and Sarah? What's your take on Lilith?
Sarah, I don't see them as ever having connected, Lilith and Sarah. Oh, you're asking
no,
and
me.
Sarah. Oh, gotcha. I'm
Right.
thinking the wife of Abraham.
Right.
No.
So,
But Lilith, to me, she was, according to rabbinic teaching and writings, Lilith was the first wife of Adam. And she
I thought
either
it was
rejected.
Eve.
Eve
No.
was the second wife. So, and that's the building of mythology, of course. So we don't know what exactly is true about that. Sarah, I was going to go ahead and just pour into that. Did you have something you wanted to add to that too?
well, I was
Did you
just
know
going to
about
go into Lilith
Mm.
because it's like
Mm.
it's that whole thing of filling the blanks and supposition that led to the rise of the midrash. That some people that some stories caught on, some didn't. I mean, stories can arise out of anything. I mean, one
Yes.
mistranslation, and you could get new characters in, like Lilith.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
As far as depending on which translation, how close you are to source material, whatnot. I mean, because there's always something lost in translation.
Yeah. Always
Because
something.
because if you look at Genesis, the creation of man and woman,
Thank
that
you, Steve.
that is supposed to be we're assuming that they were created at the same time, whereas with Adam and Eve was created later because from the rib, or later from Adam.
Right.
So something had to have gone on, that Lilith has said to whenever Adam wanted Lilith to submit to wanted a Lilith that's a tongue twister.
Lilith. Try to say that when you're
yeah,
under
to
Novocaine.
submit to him, that she said no. We're the same. Why should I submit to you? And then ran off. And then there's also other stories where she
Sarah, would you deem that as matrilineal or matriarchal among the Hebrew culture or the biblical culture? Because Native Americans deem America as matrilineal, matriarchal. Women were in charge. Women had say. Women had power. And so Lilith, in my book, I deem her as sacred because she did things that men could not do. Men are strong, powerful, yada, 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 whatever, but they don't have the power. Yeah, they live
the creative power, the creative power. Because, it
Right.
takes
women outlive men. Women always outlive men, regardless.
And by the way, Anita Palmer has said a couple of things here. I put up her posts. She's talking about how we know that Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters in addition to Abel and Cain and Seth. And if there was only the original family, she says, then the first marriages had to be between brothers and sisters. Such marriages in the beginning were not harmful. That's what we were taught, of course, in Bible school and seminary.
Well, I mean, that's a practice that continued on later on. If you look at the kings
Yes.
and queens of Europe. You know,
Well,
they were
even
living off a limited gene pool there because they were believed they had, you know, sacred rights and all that.
right.
So I
Well,
mean,
even the story we're talking about now in this series about Amenhotep II, that his
cousins.
father Tutmosis
Yeah.
III was the son of Tutmosis II, who had him by a harem wife. But he was married. Tutmosis II was married to his sister, Hatshepsut. Matkare was her name. Hatshepsut, her regnal name. And they had one kid, and she died. Princess Neferuri, who is, by the way, depicted in this little bust back here. Neferuri and Senenmut. And she died at like age 11 or to 14, somewhere in there. But they didn't have any other kids. So Noah and his family were the only ones saved from the great flood. Yeah. And according to that scripture, we forget there were probably a lot more than just Noah and his 3 sons and his wife. It said, and his sons' wives and their kids. And so there was a whole mini community on the ark, if you look at that story. But you know what was interesting, and again, and now this goes back to my whole book on the Nephilim and all of that, how that I believe there was this thing called and this is a huge can of worms to open up in the captain's cabin, but we've talked about this before, the serpent seed theory. And that serpent seed theory is that when Eve encountered the serpent in the garden, who is never called a serpent, who is never called a snake in the garden. He's called Nakosh. But this serpent introduces Eve to, by all the terms, all the verbs, all the active phrases in that whole encounter between Eve and the serpent, all are neutral phrases that are also used for sexual terms. Of seduction, of giving to, of opening up, of sharing, of doing this. They're all neutral sexual terms, meaning they're not negative terms. And it says, and Eve turned and gave it to Adam. And I've always said, you know, rather tongue in cheek, which you probably had going on in that story, the coded message is the serpent introduced sex to Eve, who in turn introduced it to Adam. Adam, look at this cool thing. And Adam's like, oh, giggity. And they have sex, all 3 of them. And
that is not a far cry from Native American
right
perspective. Now this is, you know, keep that what you're saying intact, because with Native American people, it's the same concept. It's Hawaiian concept where the sexual aspect is necessary. Why? Because sex is sacred,
yes,
holy, necessary, procreation, and all this kind of stuff, and it's male and female, and they become magic in that connection between penis and vagina. They come together, and it's wanka, holy, sacred, powerful. And you can't not do that and not have that without creating a child. So what Scotty's saying right now is true.
You can.
Mansplaining.
It's that whole aspect of the 2 shall become one, as we know in the biblical terms. And we have it in Lakota as well as Native Americans, that there's that.
Now, as also in Lakota, there was the first family had multiples, twins, triplets, quadruplets. I can't remember what they were. Maybe even quintuplets. And they had that in the Lakota story, the one where Iktope, I don't remember how to pronounce his name so well. I learned it as Iktope. Came in. There it is. And he was like the serpent character, the equivalent of the serpent character.
There's no concept of a devil We have no negative concept in Lakota culture, spirituality of a demon or a devil. It's always a trickster, a coyote or a spider.
Right.
Hey, show me. Go.
And
go,
so
go.
you've got that character. You've also got, and so you take it back to the Garden of Eden. You got Eve has 2 boys. It doesn't state it outright, but I believe that those boys, like almost every other creation first family story in different cultures, were multiples. I believe they were twins. You've got one of them, however, the serpent seed theory states that one of those boys, Cain, was the son of Nakash, and that the other boy was Abel, was the son of Adam. And when you start thinking about that, and I've said this before too, I say that too much. I should just talk about it. But my own twin daughters, we were told, were conceived almost 10 days apart. And they came in different placentas. Now, that's what we were told at the time of their birth. Conceived 10 days apart. I said, I didn't know that was even possible. And so it's possible. There's been medical stories where a woman has a baby and she could have one white child and one black child, but they're twins, depending, because she had sex in a certain window and it worked. And it generated 2 different babies that were twins. So here's the story. You get back to Cain and Abel. She has these twins. And I believe one of them was the son of Cain. One was the son of Abel. I'm sorry, the other way around. Cain was the son of, that's the way my brain's working today. Cain was the son of Nakash. Abel was the son of Adam. And this is why you have, and I've stated this many times, this is why you have the genealogical record in the Old Testament, traces the genealogy from Adam up to Abraham, from Abraham up to David, all these generations. And Noah is in the middle of that. That's why you have the book of Numbers, 13 chapters of, and Aram begat Lamech, and Lamech lay with his wife and bore 12 sons, and one of his sons bore, and you've got 13 chapters of that. I thought, what is the efficacy of that? It's because there was the prediction, the prophecy in the Garden of Eden, where God says to Nakash, the serpent character, he says, on your belly you will go. He curses him. I think that's just etiology. It's explaining a history by mythology. But he says, there will be a day when you will bite his heel, but he will return and crush your head. That is considered by Christians, by Jews, rabbinic schools, to be the first prophecy of a coming Messiah, the one who would be one of us Messiah. They called him the kinsman redeemer. Now, that kinsman redeemer, why'd they call him that? They kept saying all through the early Old Testament, the redeemer that's coming, the kinsman redeemer, the Messiah, has to be one of us. He has to be of pure human blood, which by the overstating of that over and over and over and over again, listing all the genealogies to show that the Messiah was going to come out of this line of humans. Why did they do that? It's obviating that there was an opposite to that, a line that was not the pure human, the one that was not one of us. I think that's the Cainite line.
What I want to say now, Scotty, I'm totally in line with you. Why? Because from a Native American perspective, we call that Chekba. Chekba. It sounds like it's Klingon. Chekba. Chekba. No. Chekba means twin. Twin. From the same umbilical cord.
Right.
Chekba. And so twins are always bound and connected. Even when they're separated, and one's in San Francisco, one's in New York, they're going to be connected in some kind of way. So Chekba, they're connected. They're brothers. They're brother and sister, or they're sisters, or whatever. what do you want to call it? And I love what you just said, because that it makes a lot of sense.
I think the story of the Nephilim, the story of the Messiah, if you will, of the kinsman redeemer, is the story piggybacked on the story of race interrupted, that there was an interruption to the human bloodline. And you can say it's the blood of Nakash. Those who are not into that faith might say that was the blood of extraterrestrials. That there was a divided race of humanity. Because if you have to keep saying that he's going to be one of us, this Messiah, he's going to be a kinsman redeemer, they're saying that there's somebody that might not be, and to watch out for that. Keep the bloodline pure. And that's why when it came to Noah and the Noah's Ark story, it said that God chose Noah because he was a righteous man and pure in all his generations. Well, it gets so glossed over. I didn't realize that after hearing that a million times when I was a kid, when I was an adult, post-seminary even, I was looking at that verse and I saying, linguistically, that says he was a righteous man and he was pure in all his generations, meaning back to Adam. His genealogical record was pure human. It was not part of the mixed human and celestial blood of Nakash. And, you can look at this as fact. You can look at it as mythology, as allegorical, as fable. But
it's the continuation of that us and them mentality.
Well,
yes.
I'm going to give you some guys a fact. We have
lay it on us.
We have a $2,000 historical fact of a pipe from the white buffalo calf woman in our religion, or I don't want to say, I hate to say religion, but
yeah, I know what you mean.
The white buffalo calf woman, a goddess, came to us and gave us not a pipe, but a bone pipe. And we still have it. And why we have it? We have the 17th generational Orville Looking Horse in Greengrass, South Dakota, has that pipe that is 2,000 years old. Now, if you can show me the Ark of Noah, or you can show me the Christ of Cross, that'd be great. But here in North America, we have that pipe. It's as old, if not older, than anything else. And I'm not trying to break conduct or piss off people. I'm just saying that there are things in this world that we cannot understand. There are things in this world that are mysterious, and they should stay mysterious, for us to continue on. I don't want to know all the world's mysteries. I don't want to know that. I just want to live my day-to-day life. So even though I am Native American, Lakota Sioux, ancient Native American, and we have a pipe that's very sacred, yada, 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 yada. Yeah, I live in New York. And it's, I have mad respect for Scotty, because he's been to Egypt and he's seen things and done things that I cannot comprehend. So I live it through him. And we all do that. So
here we are. People I live vicariously through. So thank you for that, by the way. And so yeah, all of that stuff. All of that stuff about the genealogies, the Messiah, the kinsman redeemer. Do we also realize that at the time of the flood, where Noah is called the righteous man who is pure in all his generations, he had to be. That's why God chose him. Were there other good people and righteous people? Probably. But he was supposedly the only one whose family tree still could trace their lineage back to Adam. And that's what had to be. And so in all of that, you've got this story that's going on of the mixed race that was to be wiped out in the flood. And the Kenites supposedly didn't exist anymore after the time of the flood. But then the Bible tells us that the Nephilim were on the earth, the offspring of the B'nai Ha-Elohim, and that the flood was coming because of that reason. Not because of the wickedness of man, but the wickedness brought to man. And the wickedness, the corruption of the bloodlines. And so all of this stuff starts to become very interesting as a study. When you say, maybe it's not what I learned in Sunday school, maybe it's something a little different. And I've talked about this so many times. I'm sure people start to tune it out after a while. Try to keep it fresh every time you talk about it is the task. So, yes, Ruben.
I was going to say, capitalizing upon that, springing upon that is that there were good Muslims, there were good Jews, there were good white people against Native Americans. There were people that were good that we never hear about.
Right, right.
You know, the rebels, there were good rebels, Southerners, that Confederates that helped.
Oh, sure.
Everybody. But we never hear that. All we hear is about the capitalization of just the Union and the Sioux and the Jews or Nazis or.
And in the same sense, everybody that we were taught was a good guy, even in the Bible, was something we learned very early on in biblical studies, was that wherever you saw somebody raised up as a hero in the Bible, you also saw their flaws and the downsides. Sarah, you were going to say something in the middle of that.
No, so I mean, that's agreeable. That's because, bad news travels quicker than good news. That bad news always, sticks.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, as opposed to
there it is.
There's always examples on
what about the good people?
Gross generalizations,
What about the good people that helped those that were being hurt or killed or fighting or whatever? What about the Quakers? What about those people that did not take its stance on the negativity?
What about just another way to look at it? What about your loyalists during the American Revolution? Loyal to the crown. Many of them fled to Canada. And so, there's my point building off of yours is there's a different side and a different angle to everything. And so.
But I mean, to me, that it goes back to, even, to the Messianic days, because most major, religions, they have a story of end of days and a final accounting. So whatever we've done in life, whether we go on to heaven or the next phase or next life or whatever it may be. I mean, psychologically, for people, at least for me, it's like, yeah, we're doing this for a reason. You're good for a reason. I mean, because being bad can be, you can get pleasure from it. It's it's not easy to be good sometimes. I mean, it's all that
it's a
breeding of behavior.
Sarah, you're right.
It's a grooming of behavior.
It's a total thought processes. We think and then we do. We think and then we do. And that's exactly what you're saying. I totally get it. It's hard to be human because we do or we destroy. That's it.
Living life is also, it's a type of suffering, because everybody suffers as well, whether it's through God or people abusing, each other, even back in the case of we were talking about the Nephilim, at least in my mind, why God chose to wipe everything out was because the Nephilim were, they were eating everything. They were cannibalizing people. They were decimating populations, and if if it had gone on, the human race would have died out. They wouldn't have survived.
And were these real giants? We would have to say, oh, there's nothing like that exists in history. It's all mythology. It's all storytelling. Were there giants that were 36 feet tall that could eat 500 head of cattle a day? You're going to pretty much wipe out everything that exists in about a week.
Right. And even just to go even earlier, if we're going with the theory that the first murder with Cain and Abel, if Cain was not from the son of Adam, then it's carrying that destructive aspect of it.
Yes.
I mean, they always say in modern Christian demonology that or even other forms of other forms of demonology, that those entities are destructive, whether it's trying to hurt other people, or eventually, if they can't reach them, they'll hurt themselves. You end up people committing suicide. You have stories of demons eating other demons, for whatever reason. I mean, it's that whole, struggle between creation and destruction.
But demonism is a Greek word, demon. Demon is a word for spirit. So when you can't take it from a Christian perspective, because demon in the Christian word is the devil, and in my culture we have no word for a devil. We have a trickster.
Right. Well, the Jews didn't originally either. They didn't have a Satan.
And so therefore, capitalizing upon that we choose what is evil and good, because we are evil.
Sure we do.
And good. We can kill and we can save at the same time. We're human.
Even with the concept of evil, it's a matter of perspective. What is beneficial? It's like, what is beneficial to me versus what is not beneficial to me or to the group. It's beneficial that we don't kill each other.
Does it have to be something that you have to benefit from? No, it's about being fortuitous. It's about being helpful. It's about being giving and loving. And the reason why I'm going to say this is that if you look at the archetype of the human mind, we have a dragon, and the dragon is born from a serpent, queen of the earth, and the eagle, the king of the sky, and they marry and they become this dragon. This dragon in the Eastern culture, in the Western cultural, is Smaug in Lord of the Rings. He's hoarding virgins and gold and whatnot. But you look in the East, the Asian culture has a dragon too. Now, how did that come to be? But they have a dragon.
Happiness.
They have a dragon that is bountiful, loving, caring. So it's a duality, duplicity of East and West. We have.
I mean, the dragon is also, the symbol of the emperor, of their leader.
Yes.
So,
but he was, prior to that, the symbol of fertility, happiness, bountiful, joy.
Positive.
Very positive thing. And I think that's why he was adopted in as an imperial emblem. But I wrote about that in my book on the reptilians, which was subtitled, it was The Secret History of the Reptilians, subtitled I can't remember. It's a big, long, lengthy subtitle. The presence of the serpent throughout human history, religion, and alien mythos was the subtitle. But there was a point I wanted to make, and it was a ways back when we were talking about Cain, is that, remember too, in the genealogies, when they trace all the way back to Adam, You notice they didn't trace every genealogical record all through the book of Numbers, the genealogies in the Old Testament. They all followed the lines with the firstborn sons. And when you get all the way back, however, to Adam, who was the firstborn son, according to the firstborn of the two twins? It was Cain. But you don't see Cain mentioned in any of these genealogies. Cain is omitted. Instead, they go for Seth, the thirdborn, because Abel was killed. Cain ran off. I think that he was omitted because he was not of the pure bloodline, once again. So they went with the thirdborn child of Adam and Eve, Seth. And I thought that was always a very interesting feature of the genealogies. So
Do you also think that there's a possibility that he was just stricken from the record, like they do
Yeah,
sometimes in
that's
Egypt?
possible.
Yeah,
It's
there's
possible he
also a
was just stricken from the
possibility.
record.
Yeah,
Because
So we're
why
not-
would he
it's
be
like-
stricken? Because he murdered his brother? He's still the firstborn son. You got a lot of firstborn sons throughout the Bible that did some pretty heinous things. So was he stricken because he was the first murderer? He ran off, married a wife, built a city, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You don't hear much about him after that, except his people were the Kenites, and the Kenites were the ones who introduced ironworking. And so, according to the biblical text, and so plows and knives and swords and things like that.
The thing I'm kind of curious about is, okay, yeah, you have the male construct and male aspect, but what about female? What about Lilith? What about women?
Don't hear much about her in the scriptural.
Yeah, well, what about the women that did things beside the men that helped? Or you never hear about that. And that's the sad part of this world. And that's why, being Native American, we always acknowledge our grandmothers and our aunties and our mothers and our sisters, because there's such a powerful thing there. And why don't they say that? Why don't they acknowledge that women had power? Women have say. Women are here.
Mm-hmm.
Women give birth. Women make us who we are.
I think you have
about Adam. It's always about Cain. It's always about Abel. It's always about
that's the culture that wrote
horse.
Those things. The culture that wrote those things was more patriarchal, and so of course they wrote more about the male line and how the Redeemer was supposed to come from the male line. But there was also a thing about the woman that you don't hear much said about. The woman who was, what did the angel say to Mary? You are a woman who is much glorified. You are highly glorified amongst women because you will bear in your womb the Messiah. And so there was a praising of women. I think there was a downplay of women, especially in the New Testament, as the literalist Orthodox Church came in and started rewriting some things for their own good. So, and I hate to say it, it's where we got to end tonight. It's 11:04. I got to be done. I am done. I'm baked, not in a good sense. And so we got to move on. We'll pick this up another time. Sarah, thank you for all your input tonight. Good
all
stuff.
Right. Thanks, guys.
Sarah.
Thanks for being here.
I'll call you in a few minutes if you want, Ruben.
Let's do that.
Please call me
tomorrow morning if we can. I need to tonight. I'm done. I'm baked. I can't even hold a conversation very well anymore. So, but
you talked most of the hours, so I think you're doing pretty good.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, I'm pretty much out of it. Trying to keep in touch with my facts was an effort tonight. So let's see if we can maybe talk in the morning.
Sure.
All right.
Sarah, give me a call, 845-986-79.
Well, don't. It's radio. Everybody under the sun.
He's like me.
I'm
I don't
already
care.
friends with you on Facebook.
I don't care.
651-468-8115. I give my number. My number's
Look
on everything.
me up on Facebook.
Well,
Yeah,
Easy
we're
as-
already friends, Ruben.
Oh, okay. Just give me a jingle, and I'd love to talk. And Scotty's got to go to bed because he's an old
I do.
man.
I'm dragging. My butt is dragging.
Well, he's been up since 4, I'm sure. But
That's not
Four.
the Jewish dragon. It's not the Chinese dragon. It's the axe dragon. So
American
I was-
Minnesota Dragons, right?
The
I
Minnesota
was
dragon.
talking to this Minnesota dragon at 4 in the morning. He was smoking a
Thank
cigarette.
you, Jay. Here.
So yeah,
Yeah.
tough enough.
Oh, you
Tough
got me
enough.
this morning. I was barely functional this morning. I was like, oh my God.
Oh, enough to have a cigarette, of course. But
Well, yeah, that's morning ritual. So
I mean, you realize that Yul Brynner died of emphysema. He was a chain smoker.
I do.
Figured you would learn that by now.
I'm not a chain smoker. So
Even so, slower. But
I had 2.5 cigarettes today. So
good for you.
he just send you
Good
some
on you.
pictures of diseased lungs and stuff, just to.
Yeah. I know everybody's like, when you don't smoke, you're fanatical about smoking. Oh, don't smoke. You're smoking. Yeah, well, Yul Brynner, he smoked like the equivalent of like 3 packs of cigarettes a day. What are you going to do when you take that much of that in? I think the body is made to overcome certain things at a certain level. Moderation in all things.
We could have had more Yul Brynner movies. if he
Indeed.
didn't.
Oh, I would have
Oh.
loved to have had more Yul Brynner.
See?
movies.
Yeah.
Indeed. I here.
I liked him in Anastasia. If you've never seen that one, that was a good movie too. Taurus Bulba was a good movie of his.
I like the something called the 7, the Cowboys.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, The Magnificent Seven.
Yeah, I like
Dun,
that.
dun, 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 dun. Yeah, that's where the Marlboro Smoking Man got his theme music.
He was
how's
good.
that for
He
a
was good.
segue?
He was a good cowboy. You know,
He was a good cowboy.
that was
Uh,
he was universal. He was universal. He could
He was
play.
in the original Westworld as the robot. The android
yeah, he was. He
with the
was. I
glowing
remember
eyes.
that.
The gunslinging android.
That scared the shit out of me. That was.
Yeah, me too. That came out in
Wow.
the early 70s, early to mid 70s. So
It's got to be late 70s. But it was
There you go.
the mark of something for him, and God love him, God keep him, hand to God, rest in peace. You know,
Yeah.
good guy.
I did, on Sarah's point, I remember a public service announcement that he did. And I think they did not come out until after his death, which was in the 70s at some point, late 70s. But it was, if I remember right, it was filmed in black and white, or he was just wearing black. And it was something about cigarette smoking. And he said to the screen, his final word on this little short thing was, and he says, and all I have to say is don't smoke, he says. And so he did a public service announcement about it.
Wow.
So, and
No,
it was,
That's good. I have Chia, older brother. I have not had a cigarette or chewing tobacco in 7 years,
oh,
and
Congratulations.
everything's good. I drink like a fish, but
yeah, we know that.
To live up to the stereotype.
So
So
Yeah.
everybody has their vices, and I'm not judging you. I'm just saying, wow.
I know, but there's just common sense. You don't have to judge somebody if you want to say, hey, look, that's bad for your health and I care about you and please don't do it.
But
but,
I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just going to say, hey,
Yeah. I remember when I first smoked in front of my pastor friend, Parson Larson. And we were talking, and I said, do you mind? I have to have a smoke. He goes, your lungs, man. That's all he said. So, not my lungs.
that's
So,
it right there.
It's good
You know,
to be king. Yes,
It's,
John Piper.
it's good to be the king. That's right.
It's good to be king.
As he coughs.
Yeah, I've had this cough for 2 weeks now. It's starting to go away.
Well, you're in
Drying up.
Wisconsin. I know Wisconsin. And I can say it
Wisconsin.
right. Wisconsin. You can't
Wisconsin.
say it like Wisconsin. You got to say Wisconsin.
That's right. And look at we've kept this show on for another 7 minutes.
All
I
right,
gotta go.
I'll let you-
I gotta go. I got nothing left. So Sarah, you have a good night. I
All
will
right,
see
Scotty,
you
I'll see you later.
hopefully on Friday when Ruben is actually going to be on the show.
Oh, that'll be great.
And
Did you already decide on a topic then, or just?
yes. It was
Oh,
the
I'm
one we were
so
supposed
proud
to
of
do.
you.
Why, thank you. Why, thank you. It's
actually have
called
something you've done
pre-planning.
before.
You know, you have to be like me and pre-plan.
Really?
This is all I live for. You know, Scotty's show is like awesome.
Well, thank you, brother Misu. And we're going to talk about again that comparative mythologies, Celtic
Yes.
and Lakota, Native American.
Well, Native and Irish, Scottish bridge between mythologies.
I'll pick up the Irish.
Aye. And I'll sing you a nice safe and sound and home again. Let the waters
Sorry.
a good shanty, a sea shanty.
I'll play
There you
you
go.
some magical flute music.
That sounds good. I'll play mine and make it happen, Captain. So
We'll be there Friday, pending disaster, pending the world ending, China bombing us, taking over, the grid coming
God.
down, anything like that. We'll be here.
We'll go
on
down
Friday.
hard. That's all right. Singing
right.
and crying, you know. So Friday at what time?
Same time as ever, 9 p.m. here, 10 p.m. your time.
All right,
we'll talk
10
before
p.m.
then.
Friday.
So,
All righty. Well, we'll connect. Sounds good.
there
And
it is.
Sarah,
All right, everybody.
give me a jingle. I'd love to talk to you.
Sure.
There you go. You late night hours, late. I can't even.
We're
talk.
owls.
Late
We're
night
owls.
owls. All right, you two. Have a good night. See you, Sarah. Misu.
To you and yours.
Love you.
And yours.
Talk to you soon.
Rainy, everybody. The
I
girls.
will. Say hi to Susie for me.
You betcha.
All right. We'll see you later.
Love you.
All right, guys. That's it. Yeah, I plan this stuff 30 seconds out, Uncle Dave says, just before he says it. That's right. You know, I never have really bad thoughts and bad things coming because I never think about anything before I say it. There's no premeditation. All right, guys. I'm getting loopier. I'm feeling the loopy. So we're out of here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving me your time. I would love to do more of this, and we're working on that to make this what we just did for the last 2 hours, the thing. And so all of you, have a good night. I'll see you on Friday. Live long and prosper.